All right, well, we'll let the folks in the back have a seat, and we'll get started. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Welcome. Welcome to a very weird version of Office Hours. So, if you're not familiar with what Office Hours is, I don't know why you're here, but thank you anyway. Office Hours is a Twitch and YouTube series I started about a year ago. We're around episode 40 now, where I answer questions about tabletop game mastering. If you are not here to answer or ask questions about tabletop game mastering, I still don't know why you're here, but thank you. The idea, so Office Hours, just to kind of give a little preamble, because I think this is a thing that I find myself returning to over and over as I answer these questions, as I deal with people's problems with game mastering. There's really just a few answers to the same questions, and I'll go over that at the beginning, but Office Hours was originally intended to be kind of a response to a conversation that I had with a friend of mine, with John Harper, who you might know from Roleplay Blades. And John and I had a conversation about GM advice in role-playing games. So if you've ever purchased a Dungeon Master's Guide or its equivalent in whatever game, usually there's some kind of semi-wishy-washy text about maybe if you wanted to do this, you could do this playing this game, but you don't have to because you're the GM, so it's okay, we're sorry. That is horseshit, and I hate it, and John also hates it. But the thing is that I think the problem is that advice, as it stands, is intentionally unspecific. It's about general circumstances that may or may not come up with rules-based applied solutions to those problems, right? If you're writing a book and you're publishing it for however many thousands of people, you can't really answer specific questions. And this is why things like sage advice came up as a thing, right? It was Wizards' attempt to solve some of those problems that they had in writing the rulebook. So what I wanted to do, and what John suggested, was answer specific questions, right? Reach out to people, use the platform that we had in Twitch and YouTube and Twitter, and actually just legitimately answer individual people's questions, which doesn't sound that revolutionary, but it's worked out so far. I feel like Office Hours has managed to accomplish a few things in its 40 episode run. I feel like a lot more people know how much I like Burning Wheel than they used to, which is nice. But it's exposed people to some different ideas about how to engage with their group and how to get better results out of the games that they're playing at the table. And really that's all we want, right? We want to have a good time playing role-playing games. If you're playing a role-playing game and you're suffering and the game isn't about suffering, you're probably not doing it right. And hopefully, Office Hours has in the past been able to give you some advice around that. And I hope that it continues to do that. I think as long as people have specific questions, I'll be able to provide specific answers. It challenges me to keep playing different games and to engage with things in a way that maybe I wouldn't have before. Y'all have some weird questions about role-playing games. The ones I do not answer on the show, they're the extra weird ones. And what I've found has been really funny is that, and this is sort of a running joke for the show, is that a lot of these questions are just relationship questions. Like, people will write in and be like, there's a player in my game and they keep making sexy eyes at me and I don't know what to do about it. The player's handbook doesn't say anything about sexy eyes. What do I do? But I think that that's fundamentally how role-playing games are. I think that's just what we're doing when we play RPGs. We sit down at the table with a group of people that we give a shit about, ostensibly. If you don't give a shit about your players, I mean, good for you, I guess, but hopefully you're sitting there with your peers, and these are people that you want to engage in a creative endeavor with, and creativity requires vulnerability. Vulnerability can feel weird and uncomfortable, and then you get into the relationship space. And I think that this sort of brings us to that initial solve for most problems in a tabletop role-playing game situation, and that's talk to your players. Right? Like, this is fundamental 101 stuff when you're having a problem with the people that you're playing with, and nobody thinks to do it. It's like, well, what's the rule for this? And you're like, just use your words like a grown-up. Just say, why are you being a dick? Please stop, you're ruining everyone's fun. And just start there. And I think that that's because we treat role-playing games like they're some special thing. We need magic skills to be able to perform correctly. And this is Gary Gygax's fault. And God love him, but he fucked up some very serious stuff when he presented role-playing games as a thing to the world. But to be fair, 1977 was a very different time for Gary and Dave, and maybe they didn't feel comfortable talking about their feelings for each other. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. But the point being that role-playing games fundamentally are, as Vincent Baker said, a conversation. And theoretically, as reasonably adapted adults, we know how to have conversations with our peers. We can listen, and we can build on the things other people say, and we don't just spend the whole time shouting fireball at each other, hoping to get what we want. So, most of the questions that come in for office hours, the answer that I give in some form or another, tailored more or less specifically to the question, is have you tried, outside of the game environment, outside of the inherent power structure of your game, have you tried just talking to your players about the problem? So if you're having an issue with your players, talk to them like grown-ups, and hopefully you'll be able to develop something out of that. And don't be weirded out if it feels uncomfortable at first. We are not socialized to talk to each other about feelings and thoughts and stuff. It's something that, especially if you're playing a role-playing game, we expect the mechanisms to deliver for us. So practice, right? Just do it. Like listen to your players, talk to them, ask them, how you feeling, man? I notice you're being especially shitty today. Is there a problem? You want to talk now? Okay. So, give yourself room to have that conversation with your players, and I bet you'll find most of the time that'll solve the problem. People will open up, they will tell you, you know what, it's not a problem with the game, it's not a problem with you, I just am having a shitty day at work, and that's why I killed everyone else in the party. I was just lashing out, just having some feelings. I think, again, the skills that we learn and it goes both ways, right? In that the skills that we learn in interacting better as human beings outside of the game will make us better players and game masters. One of the fundamental skills that a GM has is asking questions of the players about what they're interested in for their character. Right? We ask because we want to include things. We want everyone to have a good time. So the only way to learn what people want is to ask. And so that will develop as a skill both at the table and away from it. The other thing that comes up constantly, and I'm going to rag on someone's favorite game here, I'm sure, but is people playing the wrong game. There are, despite what marketing will tell you, there are right and wrong games for groups. Not every group is going to enjoy Vampire the Masquerade. Not every group is going to enjoy Pathfinder. Not every group is going to enjoy award-winning tabletop role-playing game Dungeon World, though they should. And that's fine, because that's a fundamental property of art, right? Is that if you make art that everyone loves, you have not made art. You've made pablum. She knows what I'm talking about. The thing is that like playing the wrong game often comes from groups being comfortable with only one game because that's what they learned, right? A lot of people come up on a particular role-playing game, you learn playing D&D, you move from edition to edition, sunk cost fallacy is a thing, and you just can't play anything else because God forbid, right? Like you've spent $90 on the rule books, you know how to play D&D, stop trying to make me play Fiasco, right? And that's valid if you want your campaign to be the same all the time. Like if you're comfortable playing D&D, cool, but a lot of groups have this problem, and the problem falls on the GM that they don't enjoy what they're doing because they're playing a game whose rules don't support what they want, right? And the classic example here is, people watch Game of Thrones. It's a popular TV show, I hear, and they're like, wow, I want to do that. I want courtly drama, I want backstabbing, I want, all that stuff. I'm going to play an artificer. And it doesn't work like that, right? Games are designed to engineer a certain kind of narrative. We derive story from not only the players and their desires, but from the mechanisms that the game feeds us to allow us to move from one narrative beat to another. So if you can get your group squared away, if you're capable of having conversations with them, and then on top of that, you're playing the right game, you're going in the right direction. But more often than not, those two things will be the problem. And if they're not, the third main thing is that somehow we've put all of this pressure, and this is my solidarity for the GMs out there moment, but we put all this pressure on the GM to make the game fun. If a player is not having fun, if the group is not having fun, the person who gets blamed for it is the GM. That's just how it goes, because there's this impression that we've learned from playing Dungeons and Dragons and from badly written rule books over the ages that the GM is the one who is responsible for everything going correctly. And if something fucks up, it's probably your fault, GM, and then you stay up all night crying about it because no one is supporting you, and that's not fair. It's okay. For all you cry all night GMs, it's cool. It's not your fault. Don't listen to your players. But this is the thing. Like there's all this social pressure. I get questions that are like, well, nobody's showing up to the game on time, and I'm like, why is that your fault? Nobody's having a good time, and no one will tell me why. How is that your fault? So it revolves back to the talking to your players, but we need to divorce the idea that the game master as an entity is responsible for all of the good stuff that happens at the table. We'd like to take credit when it goes well, but we have to give that up in exchange for acknowledging that the GM is just another player. A game master at the table is a player just like everyone else. You just happen to have different rules, and sometimes you have more authority, but the game should tell you how to wield that authority correctly. So, I get questions constantly that's the answer. Those three things will cover most things, but office hours is about the niche stuff. It's about the specific. So, normally this would be the part where I would go to the recorded version and whatever, but we're doing it weird now, and I have all of you in front of me. So I assume you didn't just come here to listen to me tell you general things about GMing, that maybe you have questions, like the premise of the panel was. This is where it's going to get weird, and if nobody stands up, I'm just going to leave. I'm just going to get the fuck out of here. But if you have questions, as is the way of panels since the beginning of time immemorial, there's a microphone. Put your butt behind it. And what's cool about this, go ahead, you can do it. Do it now. Go.
Just your butt?
I mean, you can put your whole body there. Whatever. I'm not going to tell you how to move around. But the thing is, I want to, and bear with me if you have a question, but you're not comfortable standing for very long, you can ask your question and sit down, but I'm gonna ask. We're gonna dialect here because I don't get to do this very often. Usually it's just me answering and going on for an hour. So if I have follow-ups, get ready. I'm gonna ask you some questions. Hit it. Let's do the thing.
So Adam, as a player in a game who wants to start GMing, and the biggest fear is I don't know if I prepped enough or if I prepped too much.
If GMing prep is your biggest fear, I envy you so much. You can fix it with graph paper, unlike all of the other problems in the world.
Yeah, but so the question is, where do you find that nice middle ground where you prepped enough where you can find out where you want to go during this game session, but at the same time you're like, oh god, the players just made the left turn instead of making the right.
Yeah, that's a for reals problem. So what game are you thinking of GMing?
Maybe just starting out with D&D because
Yeah, of course. Yeah, fifth edition or whatever your preferred version of D&D. So D&D demands a certain amount of prep from the GM. I think that we imagine all GM prep to be the same, that there is an impetus on the game master to know everything, right? So if the players say, what's behind this door? Okay, you should probably understand what might be behind that door. But if they ask, like, what's the average summer rainfall for the Shulin Valley, you can give them one of these and tell them to go home. But this is a real thing, right? Like, prep is a source of, it can both be a source of anxiety and a solution to that anxiety, because the less experienced one is as a GM, the more prepared they want to be going in. Because what if they ask a question you don't have an answer for? You don't want to feel like a jackass and be like, I don't know. So I think the first thing you want to do is accept that players will be interested in things that you do not give even a micron of a fuck about, right? They will ask you things that you can say, I neither know nor care about the answer to that, and you can let them answer, right? You can give your players the ability, you can turn it on them and say, I don't know, why does the noble court of this kingdom always wear purple? And they'll look at you like, it's your fault that there's no answer, and you can just look right back at them and be like, yeah, see, not so much fun, is it? I think the thing is you follow what the game suggests, right? If the game says these are the things that you need to be prepared for a session, do at least those things. Everything else is gravy, right? Everything else is just additional backup, and you'll find you're gonna prep initially, and then you're gonna under prep later, and that's cool, that's good. You want that, because as you get better at GMing, you're gonna shed those layers of prep, and eventually you won't really need them that much at all. You'll just be flying by the seat of your pants. But always do what the game demands, because If you do less than that, then you're on your own, right? Warranty's off, and you're gonna have to do some hacking as you go. But it will happen, right? Players will do a thing you don't expect, because that's what they do. They cause chaos and destroy the things you love. And be ready for that, but it's good. That's a good thing. It's okay, that's their job. And if you find that D&D is overtaxing you, if you find that you're like spending 6 or 8 hours a session to prep, and they're only seeing a third of that stuff, you can pull a Dragon Age 2 and just reuse that shit. You can be like, it's this cave from before, but now it's different. Cool, yeah, it's fine, the waterfall's on the left now. But do so subtly, right? Like, prep doesn't have to apply for a specific situation. You can use it later, and you can repurpose it. What might be an overlooked necromancer in the first act might be king of the necromancers in the fourth act. Give that stuff room to breathe and then bring it back in. Keep your GM notebook and don't cross anything out, because you never know when it'll come back. But do the prep that feels right for you and let that change. Don't expect it to be the same throughout your career as a GM.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This guy, that guy over there. You can applaud if you want. That's, yes. I'm gonna pretend it's for me. Thank you. All right, hit me.
So I've DM'd a couple games, and I always have a problem with the mid. Like, I just don't have the ideas I feel like aren't repetitive. I have a good idea for the first act and the third act. The second act kind of falls apart.
Sure. Now, are you going into the game thinking about it in like an act structure? Like, do you prep for it that way, or is this just there's a middle section before the climax and after the foreplay that you can't figure out?
The second part, where it's just like
Sure.
I don't want something to feel repetitive.
Yeah, I mean, that's a risk, right? Like, most tabletop role-playing games have a form of progression to them, and progression, by definition, is neither finishing a thing or starting a thing, and so is inherently repetitive, right? The level grind is a thing in games. The progress from ravenous vampire beast to human is a thing. Like, you're gonna find that some of that repetition is going to occur. It's less about avoiding it, it's less about trying to make the game not do that, and more about finding different ways to present similar things, right? Because ostensibly, your campaign has a concept, right? You've got an idea for your game. You're like, it's the world's worst Shadowrunners, and we're gonna try to play to find out who's in love with who. And the middle bit is all the awkward conversation, and yeah, it can be repetitive. It can be like, they failed another mission, isn't that funny? But it's about finding new ways to present and examine that stuff that's gonna keep you and your players interested. Now, when you say that middle section feels like dry to you, where is that feedback coming from? Is this like an internal like vibe? Are you like, I'm a terrible GM? Or is this like your players being like, you're a terrible GM?
It's internal.
Yeah, right, of course, because that's a thing, right? Like, making something and presenting it to people is a creative nightmare, and you don't want them to be bored. Don't be so hard on yourself. I bet you they don't even notice. Players are dumb as bricks. So I'm just saying. Like, people ask all the time about it showing inspiration in games, right? Like, I rip off TV shows and movies and comics and remix them myself all the time, and most of the time, there's this fear, because you know the source of what you're doing, you know the tedium is coming, that you expect your players will also see that. But chances are pretty good they're just gonna want an opportunity to show off their character's cool stuff. They're not really going to notice that it's a similar scene, or the difference between level 3 and level 5 is next to nothing. So in that way, you can focus not on what you might consider your overarching sort of plot or plan for the game, but focus on what the players want in that middle section, right? And maybe you're playing a game that rewards this, maybe you're not, right? But if you are, look to the mechanisms, look to the players' choices. What classes are they playing? What beliefs and instincts have they written? What skills have they chosen? And focus per session on different stuff, right? Be like, all right, today I'm gonna put up a challenge that really is just a bunch of skill rolls and some NPC stuff, but we're gonna focus on this character's mechanical aptitude and the fact that this character is a slime. And that's gonna be today's thing. And just like focus on that, even though mechanically you may be repeating similar stuff, the players won't notice. They're gonna be all about just getting an opportunity to be in the spotlight.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Giver.
Hi, so I'm a new GM. I've done about 3 sessions of Dungeon World with my group.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for that, by the way.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
And one thing I've been having trouble with is balancing the enemies so that my fighter and my paladin over there aren't like one-shotting them while the other guys are barely doing any tickle damage.
Yeah.
Do you have like, any advice for like balancing enemies?
Yeah, so Dungeon World as a design, we don't care about balance. That's why the fighter always feels like he's less powerful than the paladin. Sorry, fighter.
Who's the paladin?
Yeah, the paladin. So the point is that balance in Dungeon World isn't the same as what we've sort of been trained by like World of Warcraft or whatever to expect from balance, right? It's not that every character is equally effective at every other thing. It's about as far from say like 4th edition D&D as you can get, in that it's about creating fictional positioning for your characters. You want to challenge them not just with how many hit points a thing has, but are you even able to trigger hack and slash on it? So the idea here, so in Dungeon World, we lean really hard on what we call fictional positioning. It's the character's ability to put themselves in a place where they're allowed to do the mechanical stuff that they want to do. So if you want to cast the spell, fictional positioning means that you need to not have your hands bound or be gagged or... Wizard's getting exciting. You have to be in a fictional position where you can describe your character doing the thing. And when people come to a game like Dungeon World, and there are other games like it, we certainly didn't invent fictional positioning, it can be a little tough because you look at the monster stat block and you're like, all right, it has this much armor and this many hit points, and you can go ahead and hack and slash it. But it behooves the GM of games like that to ask questions of the fiction, and before you even let the players start rolling, ask, is this possible? Right? Could you do this? The reason why a dragon is scary is not because it has 1,000 hit points. It's because you have to overcome your own lizard brain fear of even approaching the thing. It has plates for skin that you can't pierce with a regular sword. There's all this fictional stuff between you and that dragon. Whereas in a game like D&D, the only thing between you and a dragon is probably like 8 squares of imaginary terrain. So what I often suggest in creating challenge is to look first to the fiction, look at what's actually happening in the game, and ask whether or not it's possible for the players to get what they want. Because depending on the kinds of players you have, and I don't know, maybe yours are more polite than this, but some players of these games will just shout the thing that they're doing. They're like, I'm gonna hack and slash the dragon, and you're like, okay, yes, fine, roll the dice. When you really need to be like, how? How are you doing that? Describe your character doing this. Dance for me, puppet. Because it's about fictional position, right? And I think that Dungeon World mechanically does this really aggressively, but most games, if not all role-playing games, are based in a fictive space. We imagine a universe that all the characters are occupying, and we like to think about what those characters are doing. It's what I think makes tabletop role-playing games worth watching on Twitch, for example, is that we're all, audience and players alike, sharing in that fictive space. It's just that a game like Dungeon World demands that the players engage it first and foremost over the mechanisms. So I would say don't worry too much about things like damage output and hit points and armor for monsters, but think about the kinds of fictional situations you can put your characters in to challenge them, because that's a principle of the GM's role in the game, right? Being a fan of the players' characters requires that you challenge them, you put them in a position to do something cool. So try to surprise them, always ask how do you do that, and think about the reality of the situation, right? Don't let them attack an iron golem with a wooden stick, because it would just break. And you can say that, that's your job as a GM, to be like, yeah, your stick breaks, get out of here. Cool.
That's putting somebody in a spot, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Rock and roll.
How can I find a compromise between the GM's desire to create and the player's desire to destroy?
I don't know that it's a desire so much as like a base urge. I don't think they can help themselves. I think the thing is, like, again, it depends. Like, what I assume you're asking, not just sort of a curiosity about the philosophical means of destruction, but like you're playing a game, right? Like you have a campaign in mind. So what game are you playing?
This is a question I form after, I don't know, I've done, usually when I do a DM session, when I start DMing, I'm doing it 2 groups at a time, and I've done for Star Wars, I've done 2 or 3 sessions of D&D, and every single time, I also did a home group, which is funny because it kind of ended up the same every single time. And when I've played as a player as well, kind of fall into that syndrome where the GM is trying to create something, I'm trying to create something, and then as a player, they just want to destroy it. You know, I come up with this elaborate story, kind of goes into the preparation that you're talking about. You know, I come up with names, and they just go and kill everyone.
And how does it feel when they do that to your stuff?
I mean, it stings. But at the same time, the best stories as a GM are also when they do that. Once they killed an old woman and she happened to be a witch.
Like you did.
So
Oh, hold the phone for a second. Hold on. So they killed an old woman who later was discovered to have been a witch.
Yeah,
I knew all along she was a witch.
I don't want it to feel that bad, so you know, she was a witch too.
So you're making them a witch after they've murdered this innocent woman to make them feel. I think you're enabling them. Is what it sounds like you're doing. Like. You know that little kid you just murdered he's a goblin, it's fine, it's a really weird goblin, it's cool, don't feel bad about yourself. So here's the thing, right? I think in Dungeons and Dragons particularly, the reward structure in the game is murder-centric, right? It's about killing things because they are in your way and you want the stuff that they have. And then when they're dead, they can't be in your way anymore, and then you get the stuff, which empowers you to kill bigger things for theirs. Like, it's a thing, it's a part of the game. I mean, if you're playing Star Wars, I don't know if I remember Star Wars correctly, but I don't really remember Luke running around murdering people with his lightsaber. Though, I mean, maybe. But the thing is, like, every game has its own reward structure to it, and the things that players are rewarded for are the things that they're going to do. You know, if you expect players to engage with Dungeons and Dragons in a pacifistic way, keep waiting, because you're gonna be waiting a long time, because they're not incentivized to do that. Players do what they are incentivized to do, and in D&D that's murder the living shit out of everything. And you said it yourself, right? Like that leads to like fun stuff for you. I think the trick comes from feeling attached to a thing that you've made and watching the players either disregard or misinterpret it. And that's okay, that's a thing that happens, right? Like you craft a lovingly formed narrative about 2 NPCs who have been desperately in love but kept apart by their disparate kingdoms, and they meet in secret with the PCs who they hope will help them get stabbed in the neck until they fucking die. And that's how it goes, right? You have to look at everything you make as if it were soaked in gasoline, and your players are 5-year-olds with lighters just running around. Because I think that's what games, D&D has taught us that's a part of tabletop role-playing, right? It came from being a war simulator and just got the scope narrowed down. And somewhere along the line, we picked up the idea that we were creating like cogent narratives out of those things, but it didn't really get attached to the game in any meaningful way. And I think if you're having fun and if your players are having fun, you don't actually have a problem. But if you're not having fun, it sounds to me like the first place to start would be to switch to a different game. Even just for like one session, right? Wait until the end of an arc, or wait until you are so fed up you don't want to play anymore, and suggest that like, hey, maybe this weekend we could try a game whose reward structure isn't about, shanking people. Your players might push back, they might enjoy Shankfest, but hopefully they will, as your friends and peers, hopefully they will give you an opportunity to try something different. See how that feels. And talk to your players afterwards. Have some decompression, talk about it, be like, so I wanted to do this because I wanted to try a game that wasn't as straightforward as D&D. I wanted to dig into some other reward structure stuff. How did y'all feel about that? And be prepared to accept if their answer is, we hated it, let's go back to fireballs and truncheons and war crimes. Because maybe that's what they like. And you might get to a point where you're drifting apart from the homicidal maniacs that you play with, and that's okay, right? We tend to get attached to groups because we think that they're the only people who will ever play role-playing games with us, but that's not true. Other people will play with you. There are other games and other groups out there, and you can have them all.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Sure.
question is primarily about, I guess, my current campaign that I'm GMing is a bit more open-ended. I'm not having so much of trouble keeping my players on track as I am with when do I police their behavior or when do I punish them, because for me, I am a bit open with how much they can do if they're willing to put the effort. Like, one of my players back there.
I love how you're all bringing your players so you can shame them.
Yeah.
Just be like, when I brought my players, this jackass is ruining my life.
One of my players and his friend spent 2 hours figuring out how to commit a major terrorist act. So when they did it, I told them,
I got
okay,
problems.
I told them downstep to chaotic evil because you guys just killed a lot of people. And like, I felt that was personally right, but at other points I feel like I'm trying to stop them from doing something when they're putting in the effort. And so when's the good middle ground?
I think, and I think this comes from a lot of different places. You know, I think that it's this attitude of sort of punitive game mastering is very much a thing that happens in tabletop role-playing games. We've learned it from somewhere, and it gets passed on through the oral tradition that it's the GM's job to be like, not only is that a shitty idea, but now your character's only level 4, so too bad for you. Like, we're not here to punish, unless you're playing a game in which the rules say punish your players, in which case stop playing that game. But we think that it's our job to decide what's acceptable or not acceptable behavior. Whereas within a game, I think that the GM's job is to go with the flow of the players. Like if you posit a situation at the beginning of your game, so if you sit down and you're like, all right, we're going to play this game and it's going to be an exploration of you know, colonial action in a brand newly discovered continent. We're going to discuss what it means to commit violence upon indigenous people, and like you have this like big idea for a campaign and they all buy in. They're like, yeah, cool, all right, let's get in on that. And then they're just like, cool, we don't get on the boat. And you're like, but the whole campaign is over there, right? Like, then you can call a timeout, step out of your role as the GM, be a person with your other people, and be like, hey, like, come on, we talked about this. This was the plan. If you don't want to do that anymore, we can't play today because I have to go and like prep something else. But if you're in the situation, like you were saying, if your players are preparing for terrorist action, as you put it, don't think about putting the chaotic evil label on them as a punitive action. Think about it as a question. Think about it as, all right, so this isn't maybe the Crusaders of Law and Justice we had discussed earlier on. You know, prevailing morality determines that this might be a horrible thing for you to do. But if you want to play a game that's about horrible people, then we can play that, but you're all going to need to make these changes to your character. It's not our role as game masters as much as we would like to, and I talked about this in an earlier episode of the show. Sometimes when the player is like doing a thing and like they're rolling 20s all day and they just keep getting what they want, and you're just like, I could just kill you. I could just fucking kill you right now, and you'd stop looking at me so smugly, and you'll be dead. I could do that to you. But that's not our job, right? Our job on any scale isn't to crack the whip. It's to engage the players in the kinds of narratives that we all want to be a part of. And it kind of sounds like your players want to be a bunch of war criminals. You should hook up with that guy. And that's okay. Like, I guess the question is, like, why do you feel like you need to take punitive action? What is it for you? What's the driving force behind that urge?
I guess it's not so much I want to take punitive action against them, because while I downstep them to their chaotic evil, the reason they downstep to that is because they killed a lot of people, and one of the chaotic evil gods loved that. And so that's why
it's just tough love. You're like, no, it's not a punishment.
Yeah, it was.
Evil loves you.
It was a
You're
reward.
doing great.
There was a reward, but I still felt like you guys did something very bad.
It wasn't so much that you punished them, it's just they punished themselves with their horrible behavior. No, I mean, I feel what you're putting out. So I think that is a legit desire, the desire to neutrally present a universe in which there are consequences for player behavior. I think the thing about maybe the chaotic evil problem is that it's not necessarily a downgrade. It's a lateral move, right? Like changing their alignment doesn't necessarily affect them or the campaign. It's a reflection of the ongoing things that are happening in the world. You can think about a player's sheet as being prescriptive and descriptive. It describes the state of the character, but also prescribes the kinds of behaviors and things the characters are going to do. So if a character changes, if they morally start going off into left field, it makes sense in a non-punitive, keeping track of the world way to adjust their alignment, to tell them, this is more fitting of this kind of alignment. But also they're going to act in accordance with their sheet, right? They're going to do the things that they have mechanically available to them. So if you make them chaotic evil, don't expect them to go anywhere else, right? If you say, here you go, here's your new alignment, they're probably not going to climb that ladder back up into goodness. And make sure that's like fun for you, like playing that game. Because it sounds like the only problem here is that you're afraid that they're going to disagree with you.
Not so much. I'm more afraid of, I guess, it's not become an issue that the campaign can stay on track, and it's not an issue that I can see coming up with players. It's just an issue of I don't want to feel like I'm railroading them on a campaign that I've declared as open. That's why I kind of gave them the option. They put in the effort. They
Right.
did something very bad. I let them do something very bad.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't sound like you have a problem. It sounds like you're on track. Don't think of it as punishment. Think of it as adjusting their sheet as according to their behavior. In the same way you would if they suffered a curse and lost wisdom, or if they lost a magic item or gained a new one. Part of your job is to help them mechanically represent the things that are happening in the game. So alignment change is totally within your purview to suggest, to be like, hey, you're acting like this. I think it makes sense for everybody to change their alignment. And if somebody cries about it, you can be like, read what chaotic evil means. That's you. Look, it's a picture of you in the book. Look, there's you stabbing that old lady. She was a witch all along. Yeah. So I think you're doing fine. Stay the course.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Next up on Justification Hour.
First off, big fan. I love watching a role play. I didn't realize there was one cast here, so I'm a little bit nervous now. I've been playing GMing Pathfinder for about 3 years now. I've got like my first gen players where we all learn the role set together, so we're all on the same level. I have my second gen players where I had to teach them. I walked on the rule set. They kind of learned and got more and more into the core rule set. Now I've got my third generation of friends and girlfriend who enjoy the theme and motifs, but are worried about pacing. And I don't want to get to the point where it's like, well, do you think you hit the dragon? Yes or no? Because then it's just kind of like this back and forth.
How do you feel about hitting the dragon? Tell me more about the dragon. Yeah, no, I mean, I feel you. I also like that, yes, it does indeed take 3 full generations to learn how to play Pathfinder. I've inherited my grandfather's character sheet. I mean, it's one of those things, and Pathfinder is, it's not unique in this regard, but it is very much a truism that your first Pathfinder character is a failure. You will make it wrong. That's okay, unless someone else is playing your character for you, and it's like, no, don't grapple. Don't. What are you doing? Stop grappling. That's a thing, and it's not just Pathfinder, right? D&D is the same way. The first time you play it, you make a character that later, when you're on your 4th or 5th character max, you realize your first character, you did not play them optimally, and because that's a part of gameplay, right? Learning how to play a game. Sometimes we lean into the RP part too hard and we forget the G. Don't forget the G. These are games, right? You can be better at them as you learn how to play, and it's tough coming into it and having different priorities around what you expect play to be like.
Oh, my question is really like the pacing. Like, is there a way to kind of entice them more, or do I just say, look, deal with it?
Does Pathfinder give you any tools to pace your game? Does it tell you anything about scene framing or
Not really.
motivation or no? Challenge ratings though.
Yeah.
Lots of those. I mean, I'm not just going to talk shit about Pathfinder, but it does one thing. It does one thing really well, and good games do one thing really well. Like you can see I'm trying really hard to say this. It's a good game, but it's because it's good at doing one thing, and that's being a tactical, complex combat simulator, right? Pathfinder is the EVE Online of tabletop RPGs, and you either like that or you don't, and it can be grueling, especially if you have an audience, because when we play at home, we don't have a Twitch audience or YouTube audience watching us play, but we have the audience of the other people at the table. And when it's you and your father and your father's father, you don't want to embarrass them by playing poorly. You don't want to be that guy at the table that's like, I picked this race because the art was good. And they're like, oh, you're a gnome barbarian? Cool. Get out. And it's functionally like it's a real problem with certain groups in that kind of game. I've been that guy. I've been the like, stop it, get out in D&D because you can play these games effectively or not. And so there is a lot of pressure on players who are just like, I don't know, I just want to like think about what my character would do and do that. And I don't, what, attack modifiers? What are those? So the mix of the group might be the first place to look. Like you might want to have like a separate game with the people who are new to it and be like, hey, so these guys are in another room and you don't have to worry about them yelling about what race you've chosen. You just do you, and I'll teach you slowly how to be a Pathfinder player. If that's a responsibility you want to take on, right? It's not your job. Teaching the game is not your job. It's not your job. Don't do it. Unless you want to. The other thing you can do is hit the older generation. Go after Grandpa Pathfinder and be like, look, you know how to play this game. I am going to assume you are not going to be a jerk to these people who don't know how to play the game and help them figure it out so that everybody's playing. It's like when you play, my analogy is always when you play Pandemic with a bunch of people who know how to play Pandemic and you never played it before, you're not playing Pandemic. They're just like, go there, nope, there, use your cart, just give me that. So you get to watch people play. So try to avoid that situation. But again, not your job. You're the GM. You got a bunch of other shit to do. Do that shit first. But as players, talk to your players and be like, I know that this game can be tricky. There is a disparity. And I think that the reason why those players who are more interested in, as you say, like the scene and the pacing and like the more cinematic aspect of it, those folks might benefit from trying a different game. There are games that are very much about what's happening in this scene, what is the overall flow of the game. Games like Primetime Adventures, very much about a cinematic experience. So they may actually enjoy that better, but they may also just need some time to learn, because it sucks being the noob in a game that's real hard. Try playing Dota ever. Like, it's not fun, and you don't want your group to be those people that are just screaming at you when you don't know how to play. We're engaging in a creative activity together, and we need to leave space for each other to play the game we want to play. But talk to your players, ask them, like, I get that you're feeling the narrative vibe. Do you want to try something different? Do you want to play a game where I don't have to be like, yes, flowery description. Okay, but what action are you taking? Right.
So I started GMing about a year and a half ago with Star Wars RPG.
Which one?
Fantasy Flights.
Thanks. I would have said that no matter what you said. I approve of your choice. Except Saga Edition. Fuck that game. Sorry, Wizards. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So it was first time doing any of it really, and all of us were new to it, and I got really generous with the XP at the beginning starting out and letting them do things, and now they're like gods rolling through the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the only logical thing and escalated everybody else.
Right, of course, yeah.
But now it's to the point to where it's like coin toss.
They're just running around punching Star Destroyers and throwing Death Stars at each other.
Like, one person rolls and there goes one of my baddies, and I roll, there goes one of them, and I'm just worried we're headed towards the TPK, and I've got to figure out what I can do about it without making everybody re-roll.
Yeah, arms racing in tabletop role-playing games is definitely a thing, because there's this intended arc that they're meant to climb gradually. But I don't think if the game is well designed that inherently there's anything wrong with starting at any point. Like, your game starting at the bottom and getting to the top real quick isn't broken or wrong in any major way. It's just that you went to the high point real fast, right? You could have started there and it would have been the same campaign. So you haven't screwed up. I think that it is tough when you end up in this position because you started writing Spider-Man comics and now you're trying to write Superman comics, and Superman's boring as shit. You can't challenge Superman unless you're doing totally over-the-top stuff. And it cannot feel like Star Wars, right? Because Star Wars is that sort of slow progression from New Hope to Jedi. And I think what you need to do is go after the stuff that isn't so easily solved by dice rolls or by immediate use of like dramatic force, right? Like, I don't know the premise of your game, but there's got to be stuff that is adjacent to the players. Look for Aunt May. go after her, right? And Aunt May is the weak point. It's not necessarily about the direct application of GM force, but about balancing the kinds of challenges that you're presenting your players. That's a lot harder, admittedly, right? Like it's much easier to just be like, you're level 5, I'm gonna do a level 5 encounter, and the book says that should work out. It's much harder to be like, I understand your character's motivations and desires, and I'm gonna put pressure on you that you can't just solve by throwing a Death Star at it. So being creative, like thinking about creative applications of the rules that you have. Which of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games are you playing? Or are you just like mixing them?
We threw them all 3 together.
Yeah, okay. That game has in it a semi-well designed system for putting pressure on players that they can't really just straight up solve. Like if they're a smuggler, they've got that obligation, right? They got that thing, that sneaking thing. Look at ways to go after them on those levels. And that'd be the place I would start with that game, at least.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm in the middle of a panel. It's going pretty good.
So I'm gonna piggyback off my brother's question over here. I'm a part of the Hag Slayers.
Yeah.
So I killed the old lady at Shanghai.
Listen, man, I'm sure she had it coming. She was looking at you funny.
You know, I was in the hospital actually at the time.
Sure.
So basically, I wanted to know, right, after all the times you played these games, right, you DM, you played, and we all like to screw around, right, like you said, we like to set
No,
fire.
role-playing games are serious business. Stop laughing.
You know, my question really is like, what would you say after all that you've done are the cardinal wrongs of DMing and playing, right? Like, this is just the thing, like, it doesn't matter how free you guys are, like, just don't do this. Like, this has always led us to have a bad time in our group. This has always led to our players.
Yeah.
Like, what is those things you said after all this time, don't do these things?
So, I mean, there's a couple, right? A couple of things that come up. I think first and foremost, and this is this is White Wolf's fault. But sorry, White Wolf, it's true. Mark Reinhagen, you did it. There's this thing that we think is in role-playing games called the golden rule, where the game master can just be like, these rules, I don't care for them, and just discard them at a whim, or make up new rules. Be like, oh, I have this rule here that says, fuck you, you're dead, right? Disregarding the systems that we engage to play is the same as not listening to a person at a table. We would not let that fly, right? If it was like you and your friend and 2 of your other friends, and you were like, I attack him, and someone was like, did anybody hear that sound? What was that? No, we'll just ignore you and move on. We wouldn't do that to a player, so we can't do it to the rules. We have to play by the rules. We can adjust them. Hacking the rules is a part of playing. Almost all GMs are game designers, but the thing is that the rules exist for a reason, and ignoring them is a pitfall. You do it at your own peril. So I think doing that without fully understanding the rules is the first one that people do. I think being an asshole to other players, not to characters. I think characters can be shitty to each other as long as you're being decent to each other as players, and I think we overlook that sometimes. I think sometimes I talk about it all the time, and I'm really bad at citing the person that came up with this. I think it was Greg Stolze, but there's a thing in gaming, as in the world, called the Nuremberg defense. And in gaming, the context for the Nuremberg defense of gaming is you're saying essentially, I'm not being an asshole, my character's being an asshole, right? And you can watch someone not having fun, and you can be like, oh, cool, I stab your pet again. I'm chaotic evil, I can get away with it. And then the GM looks at you and is like, well, what are you doing? And you're like, I don't know, I'm chaotic evil. I can do whatever I want, right? Saying, I would have done this because my character does it, it's a way to be a jerk to your friends. Don't do that. Stop it if you're doing it already. And if you know anyone at your table that is playing an evil character so they can get their jollies being a dick to you and your friends, don't let them do it. That's the other thing, is we don't treat each other like people at the table sometimes. We treat each other like characters that don't have like actual real feelings in real life. And then the stuff that I talked about at the beginning, right? Not talking to your players, refusing to engage in a game in good faith, making decisions that you know are shitty, but you're covering them up because you're playing a game. And I'm like using really aggressive, like it's you doing this language, but it's not. I mean, I assume, is it him? Is he doing this? Yeah, I know, that's why I'm asking him. Quiet you.
Then you punched me in the crotch 5 times and sent me to the hospital. Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's put that on the list. Let's put
No.
physical violence against fellow players
No,
on
but
the list.
we've gone through so many different games together, and we've all taken turns as DMs and stuff, and so we've always had a player that was like, screw you guys, like this sucks, or like, we do that and we start, pissing off our DM and stuff, so it's like, how do we make it fun for everyone, including people that, are new to the house, and like, yo, come on in, jump into like a new game, it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think just like basic common human decency is a real nice place to start. I feel like maybe. Yes. Yeah. Start there.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I have a game design question.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Run. Don't do it.
So I'm realizing I kind of have three problems. And I think it comes from the fact that I'm a software developer, and I'm realizing that a role-playing game is more like a novel than it is a bit of computer code.
I mean, maybe play at the table, but we'll talk about this. Keep going.
And I'm running into how much material do I need to playtest? What should the feedback cycle look like? And when do I stop iterating on an idea and kind of?
The bare minimum, it depends, and as soon as possible. So when you're making, it's actually not, so the process of playing a game, right, sitting down with your friends and creating a narrative space together, that's like writing a novel, but making a role-playing game is a lot more akin to machining a set of tools, right? So when we sit down to play a role-playing game, we're all taking things out of the toolbox that is the game, right? So you might today want to use your character to accomplish a particular task. You want to play this game and you want to build a house. So you're going to make a character that is a hammer. Your character is your hammer and your nails. You're not going to pick a paintbrush. You're going to assume someone else will be the paintbrush so that when you're done building, they can do that. You're creating a tool set when you build a role-playing game. And then you're letting people make something with that tool. So I would start by thinking about it that way, because everything that you make will engender a particular behavior at the table. It'll enforce certain constraints on their creativity, but it'll also encourage them to create in certain ways. So think about it that way. What you need to go into your first playtest will depend on the first wholly formed thing for your game. Far too often the first playtest is like, here's a finished PDF and we paid several $1,000s to have someone lay it out and do graphic design and no one likes it, oh God, right? It's like the playtest is, here's the Kickstarter, check it out. Just start with like 2 or 3 character types. Start with like really constrained stuff. Start with, you don't even get to make any decisions about your character. You can be the fighter or the magic user, and that is it. And these are the things I'm testing. And give the players and the GM, if not a specifically constrained scenario, give them at least something that they can use in a very focused way. Say, you should be able to, with the tools I'm giving you, accomplish these things. Right? The GM should be able to navigate these 3 rooms. The player should be able to overcome puzzles A, B, and C and fight monster D. At the end of that, here are some questions to think about, right? Don't be afraid to be real specific about how you want to do that. And this goes for designing entire games, but it also goes for if you're doing like additional material for other people's games, if you want to playtest like a class for Dungeon World, or you're getting into doing any of the like DM Guild stuff for Wizards, you want to create your own licensed stuff, it's all kind of the same process. When you're playtesting it, you want to build something that people can use to go through a process, right? Don't give them, even though role-playing games are an open-ended thing, don't give them the entire universe because you'll never get feedback. They'll say, we did this other thing you could never have conceived of, and you'll get to that point. There'll be a point where you need feedback like that, but you want to give them something constrained so that they don't go all off the rails and weird. Let them have that later when the game's more developed. And then as far as feedback goes, like in my experience, the more direct you ask for feedback, the better the process will be. Like if you just say, I don't know, how did you feel? Was it fun? You're not trying to design fun. You cannot make fun. Fun is impossible. Fun is a byproduct of a good game. And if you ask specific questions, if you say, did the fighter kill all the monsters in X amount of rounds? How many times did you roll a 10? Like real specific questions, that'll give you the impetus to understand and adjust your design. And I think that you gotta give yourself space to ask more questions about the feedback you get. Players will, and you may have heard this before, in your other role, but people will try to give you feedback about how to fix things. Ignore that. Don't, like, if someone says, the fighter should have 10 more hit points, you can be like, you should shut up. What you want them to say is, I died. I died really fast, and that was bad. I didn't have fun because I died really fast. Then you can be like, maybe the fighter should have 10 more hit points. Listen really intently to the problems they have. Don't listen so intently to the way they think you should fix them, because that's your job. You're making the game, not them. And then iterate, build on that, right? Start with your little thing, put some more layers of complexity, change the little thing, throw the whole thing in the garbage, start a new game. Do that 15 or 16 times, cry yourself to sleep, and you're good to go. You're welcome. Game design.
Hi, my name's Jack. So my question is, this may be more of an opinion piece, but
Can I have an opinion first? It's about your shirt. I like it a lot.
how do you like it?
Yeah, it's good. It's really
Give me the
good.
idea. I stole this from you.
It's primo. I like it.
When you're trying to run horror in role-playing games,
Ooh, I like this question.
okay, how do you make the Squamous Eldritch thing scary instead of just like, okay, it's got how many eyes, right? How many hit points was that?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, how do you,
Horror and role-playing
how do you terrify
games.
people at the table?
Horror and roll, don't do it. It's impossible. No, it's not impossible. It's so hard though, because of so many reasons, God. So first of all, the Call of Cthulhu syndrome, right? Where if it has hit points, we can kill it. Luke Crane and I once for a panel sat down and figured it would take 16 sticks of dynamite on average to kill Cthulhu forever. 16, a mere 16 sticks of dynamite. Fuck you, Lovecraft. The thing is that horror is derived from uncertainty, and in an improvisational situation, which inherently all role-playing games are, improvisation is constantly present, and people respond to not knowing what to do or say by getting silly, right? We break the tension. We want to laugh because we feel nervous. Like, my character might die. I'm going to make a joke so I don't feel so tense about that. We deviate. This is why, I had this conversation with Jason Morningstar after Fiasco came out, where he was saying, most games of Fiasco, if you're not familiar with it, it's a really fun game. You should check it out. It's really good for building shared narrative space, for like letting everybody have a say and stuff. But it requires a lot of improvisational input. And it leads to goofy games. It leads to people just coming up with the silliest thing they can think of first because they're nervous, because it's much easier to make someone laugh than it is to make them like have a feel, especially fear. Because we can't scare characters, right? Like I can make a character and I can say, my character is afraid of water. My character is hydrophobic. And you can be like, you open the door and inside you see a bathtub. And I'm gonna be like, and then what? And you're like, yeah, but you're supposed to be scared because it says right here, take 1d4 scare points. But that's not how people work, right? And so you get into this dangerous territory that some games I think have tried to dip their toe into. It's like GMing, like masterclass, where you try to scare the players, where you're either having them play themselves and you're having them tell you like what they're actually like uncomfortable about and scared of. And then it's your job to be a responsible human being and do that in a way that like freaks them out but doesn't like harm them psychologically. Because I think, and it's like, it's funny to think like, oh, someone might say something at the table that we might like freak out about, but like it happens, right? Like we don't have an innate understanding of everybody's own personal like lived experience, and what might be like funny or kind of creepy for one player might be like intensely upsetting for another, and you don't want to stumble into that space. So you kind of have to play with a group that's willing to overcome their own silliness in the face of feeling fear, settle into that feeling and be okay with feeling anxious or upset, and then play into like actual real fears, because again, your players, as much as they might act like it, are not fictional constructs. They're humans with like feelings about stuff. And then, God forbid, you have to find a game that's going to support all of you in doing that. And that's why I think we've seen so much success in games that deal with psychological issues, not in the tabletop space, but in LARP. In Nordic LARP particularly. A lot of Nordic LARP is about social issues, it's about psychological stuff, because you're so much more present in the moment. And if you're looking to, whatever game you end up playing, if you're looking to elicit a sort of fear or tension response from the players you're playing with, I would suggest looking into, there's lots of good translated articles, looking into how Nordic LARP handles like fear and like deep emotional stuff in games, because they're real good at it. It's a thing that they've got lots of practice doing. So check that out and talk to your players. Be like, I want to play a scary game. I want you to feel scared while we play it. How can we do that in a way that's safe? Get consent and do that. Yeah, they're like, you need to scare us. So your first question should be, are you sure? Because I don't know if you're sure. And then talk about it. Like, if you feel like that's a task you're up to, have that conversation with them, and if they're willing to buy in, and then check in all the time. Take breaks. Be like, I can see you sweating over there when I was describing that thing that you told me you wanted me to scare you with. Are you okay? And don't be scared of that kind of conversation. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, how am I doing? All right, let's just do these two, and then we'll be done. All right, go.
Okay, I have a specific question about like investigation.
Yeah.
How often or should I even have like skill checks involved? Because I feel like a lot of time I run into the problem like, all right, you search the room, like, okay, I searched the room. I'm like, how do you search the room? Like, okay, what's in the room? Like, there's a bed. Like, I searched the bed.
We stand astride two types of game. On the one hand, there is our 5th editions and our Pathfinders, and on the other, there are our basic D&Ds, our Moldvays. And in the Moldvay hand, we carry a 10-foot pole, and we take 45 minutes to explore a 10 by 10 room, because we're describing in very intimate detail how we lick each tile of the floor. Because the last room we were in, one of those tiles was magic. On the other hand, we enter a room and we say, it's a perception check. No, I can't come out. Right? So it depends. How much faffing around do you want your players to do, and how intimate do you want to take those moments? If you're okay with being like, cool, everybody make a perception check, I'm going to take the highest one, I will tell you everything you find in the room, great. Do that and move on. But pay attention to the rules that the game gives you, and find what's boring for you, and then don't do that.
Yeah, if I like this, like, how do I guide them towards if I don't want to do like skill checks?
Just tell them.
Okay.
Just be like, we are cutting this skill out of the game completely. You're going to tell me what your character does. If you find a thing, you find a thing. If you don't, cool. And you can do that, but do it before you play, right? Don't do it in the moment. Say like, I hate perception checks, I hate investigation, we're cutting them. And if your players are like, yeah, that sounds fun, then cool, they'll start licking tiles. Cool. All right, I don't want to cut you off, so I'm going to answer your question. I'm so sorry. Just let's be fast. They were like, get the fuck out of here, Adam.
Real quick.
Yeah, let's do it. Play Burning Wheel.
And some advice on how to incorporate some of the more social aspects in games. So like there might be a game you know of where people, I think it's called Mirror Shades.
Yeah, Mirror Shades is a great example of what not to do, because Shadowrun is not good at what we were doing.
But that's a lot of games that I've played in the past. Most of them don't actually encourage that kind of social interaction between the players and/or really deep relationships with the NPCs in a lot of ways. Do you have any advice on how to encourage that? I've had groups that we, in fact, discussed, hey, let's do more of this kind of thing. And then we always sort of end up back in the same tropes that we've had before and not doing it.
Reward your players for doing that. Find a mechanical way to incentivize, like the reason, and I make jokes about Mirror Shades. Mirror Shades is a Shadowrun game that was a cyberpunk dating sim by accident. You should watch it, it's a train wreck. But it's a sexy train wreck. But the thing is, the players will do what they're rewarded to do, and if you reward them for doing things, it will change the game. I introduced beliefs, instincts, and goals to Shadowrun. The train wreck is my fault. Those were a mechanical thing I put on the tracks that sent it off in a weird direction, and the players played off of that because I was rewarding them for giving a shit about things in the universe. So you can hack the reward structure of the game that you're playing. You can make it more about that, or you can find a game whose mechanisms already reward that kind of behavior, that kind of engagement, and then either play the game as written or find the things about it that do that, and then hack them and put them in another game. I would suggest looking at Mouse Guard, Torchbearer, or Burning Wheel for any kind of like character centrism in games. Those three, they're all kind of the same family. They do that stuff really well. They make the players care about the characters. You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome for that too. So this has been the extra weird version of Office Hours. Thanks for coming, everybody. you want to get involved in office hours in the internets, I have a website. It's www.adam-koval.com. You can go there, click the office hours link, record your question, and then tune in to either my Twitch channel or my YouTube channel for your question answered in the future. Thank you so much for coming and not leaving me up here alone. I love you. I will see you later. Goodbye, everybody.